When a game asks you to make a choice about how you want to play it, it's, it's nice if that choice is interesting. If I'm going to be made to choose, I want the choice to be compelling. And one of the primary ways that game systems create that interest is with opportunity cost. This is that limitations breed creativity stuff. You have limited resources to spend or limited space in your build, and you have to make hopefully impactful choices about what to use and what to lose. It may seem less fun to get to bring along less options at once, but opportunity cost employed well can keep the number of things you're using at once at a manageable level while providing deep trade-offs that leave you wanting to try out even more stuff. The game's not going anywhere after all. It's nice to have a focused experience and then mix it up the next time you play. To me, the ultimate triumph of opportunity cost is when the player basically never stops wanting to make different decisions. The game offered a choice, the player chose something over something else, they enjoyed it but wanted to choose another option too, and then upon experiencing that second option, ideally, they still like both of the things they tried for different reasons and would also be interested in trying even more. That's magic. As with all Buildcraft basics, opportunity cost can be held back by a lot of other aspects of a game's systems. In this case, particularly the player's ability or lack thereof to respec. If part of the fun is in making and changing your build and enjoying those trade-offs, you generally need to be able to change your build for a low time or resource cost, or for none at all. So, opportunity cost. Hey, welcome aboard, by the way. Next, I have some examples I'd like to show you. Here's an elegant one in Pyre. So as you'll see, each character has these 2 talent trees, and you get only 4 points between them. So with 4 points, you can either max out one tree, but then you get nothing from the other. You can go half and half, take the tier 1 perk from each and then a tier 2 perk from each of the trees, but you won't get either tree's tier 3 perk, and these tend to be stronger because they have the opportunity cost of costing a lot of commitment in that one tree. Opportunity cost within opportunity cost. And then I really like this structure where there are 2 tier 2 talents for each tree. Since you get 2 choices for what to get on the way to your tier 3, and if you want the tier 3, you kind of still have a choice at every step of the way. So watch this. Let's say I pick one tree, so I'm picking between these 2 options. So I've picked that. Now I'm picking between 3 different options, but let's just say I want the tier 3 perk. So I'm still picking between 2. Because choosing this tree opened up 2 tier 2 options, there's still a choice. It's not like I'm just beelining this. I can take one or both. Let's just say I take one. I can take this tier 3 perk, but the moment I do that, I'm locking myself out of these tier 2 perks, so there's still kind of an opportunity cost thing going on. And even here, I went all the way in the tree, but for my remaining point, I don't just have to take the other tree. I could go all in on this one. This is really, really nice. They made it so you kind of get more options when the opportunity cost would be getting depleted. These trees were designed in such a way that there are as few moments as possible where there's no real choice and you're just trying to fill out a tree. Although, obviously this is another place where opportunity cost may be built well in theory, but could fail in practice if the game's other aspects, the other parts of the build system, aren't tuned very well. In this case, that would be balance. I think this is a good structure for these trees, but not all of those talents feel like fair trade-offs I'm going to have to think hard about. And that's extremely difficult to achieve. I don't think Pyre is doing an especially bad job. Just saying, of course, balance is connected to fun opportunity cost in that way. I mean, look at some of this stuff. Like, I'm not going to trade away the ability to fly or have infinite stamina super easily, so not every combination of those perks is going to lead to an interesting opportunity cost choice, but they did a good job insofar as it's like humanly possible. One more thing here is just the size of these decision points. I mean, putting aside the option between different talismans for a moment, but if you were playing the base game, the campaign, you wouldn't normally have all of these unlocked. Yeah, this is a lot of decisions, but you do still only get one. And on the whole, they did a really good job making it so you can actually appreciate the opportunity costs at work here. One common problem with opportunity cost is that it sometimes becomes kind of incalculable by mere mortals if it gets too complicated. You can't easily appreciate the impact of the trade-offs you're making, even if they're theoretically compelling, if they're just too complicated. These trees make it very easy to keep track of what you're trading away by picking any one option, and these characters control in a simple enough way that you notice when you make a change, yet they have enough complexity that there's enough design space for lots of interesting decisions. All right, on the other hand, you got Warframe, tons of space, 3 weapons, 4, 5. If I keep broadening what counts as a weapon, it'll be more. Most of which have their own arcane enhancements and utility mod slots. Oh, your Warframe has those too. In playing with opportunity cost, it's useful to consider these different parts of your loadout as similar slots in your build, which may be spent to get effects you want interchangeably, but that is challenging when there are many different kinds of slots. Let's get some energy for this loadout. So I could use my Operator Focus School to get Zenric's Wellspring. There's a Warframe Arcane Enhancement that gives you an increase to energy income when you get an energy orb a good amount of the time. Best not forget Rage and its similar partner Hunter Adrenaline. These give you energy when you take damage from enemies, quite a bit potentially. In fact, do you one better. Let's just search energy and we've got a lot of options. There's Energy Siphon and Aura. We also just have Energy Nexus, 2 mods that give you energy regen. Now, this might not be as much, so you could consider it to be half of a unit of energy. Is Rage 1 unit or multiple? Both of them together doesn't necessarily give you more energy because your energy bar is just going to fill up, but then you have flow. But then there are weapon effects that give your Warframe energy as well. And Warframe just has a lot of this kind of stuff nowadays. There are lots of places where you can funnel power from one part of your loadout to another. And as more and more updates come out, there are more and more ways to do that, getting us near the point where you could almost say opportunity cost is getting lower and lower. You can see how it would be a lot harder to appreciate opportunity cost this way. And there's another related effect. Basically anything that's useful in Warframe, you can have all in one loadout, or you can get pretty close, which is kind of interesting in its own right. You know, yes, each frame has their own abilities, and many of them don't heal themselves or what have you, but there are dozens of ways to heal yourself, all with difficult to quantify opportunity costs in theory, and very little cost in practice because you have so much space, devolving into simply finding which sources of whatever the player needs will fit on the loadout they want to make. As a result, what I like to do with this kind of system is get really demanding and greedy. What I'm doing is essentially putting back in the opportunity cost with my own desires. 2 popular builds for a frame, combine them into one and add a third for good measure. Try to do it all in one loadout. More damage or more survivability. Give me the good stuff from both. You get the freedom to take the high quality sources of each thing you want and modulate your exact amount by including weaker sources of things you need, well, or just want more of. But to some extent, I do think such a type of buildcraft devolves into a mass of good stuff. I mean, it's been kind of difficult to show examples in the Warframe part of this video because you just don't need to do any of these things. Okay, and now a weird example. This is Risk of Rain 2, where you aren't exactly making a build like in those other examples. Most items in this game are designed to combo together into one or very few super builds. And these will cause massive chain reactions that allow you to potentially survive the escalating difficulty if you assemble those chain reactions in time. And then you've got to get them off on enemies, so a sort of deadly pistol duel ensues, where either you hit them first and the chain reaction, explodes damage into an enemy or group of enemies, or they hit you first, and then you die if you get hit again before managing to heal up and get back your one-shot protection, which you do by, you guessed it, doing your chain reaction and hitting them first with, lifesteal items. Of course, this game has some normal opportunity cost. You can pick between a few different options for abilities on most characters. Multi has this thing where you pick different attachments for each of their 2 arms. That's cool. Now, not all of these are necessarily meant to be choices or trade-offs. Usually you unlock the stuff on the right with achievements. I have everything unlocked now, but a lot of them kind of are just better, or their impact is quite a bit larger than similar items. Captain starts out with these healing probes, but being able to buy an item for free often can give you healing, at the very least, is often a lot better. Where there are some options that are definitely a real trade-off. There's clearly a benefit between, this has longer range, but this does more damage at close range. Like, yes, that's a trade-off. So it is doing a little bit of the thing where it's confusing to translate all of those different parts of your loadout, I guess, into value, get a way to deal with crowds or some mobility or whatever, because not all of the slots in Risk of Rain 2's, ability selection screen are being used for the same thing in the game's design. Some of them are more like a form of progression where you do the achievement and then you get a better ability. They at least might feel more like that. while others are more of a trade-off. You know, you unlock a new option that is better sometimes in different ways. And in the first place, this really isn't that remarkable. Like, most games have some form of opportunity cost. It's nothing to write home about on its own. But Risk of Rain 2 also has a much more deranged form of opportunity cost in the difficulty scaling timer. You aren't choosing which items to buy in the base game. It's just random chests. Now, I've modded it to be those multi-shops you've been seeing around. And oh look, more opportunity cost. But beyond that, you have to decide whether to stay or go. With the game always getting harder, you have to weigh the benefit of having that item you want against the benefit of enemies being globally weaker for the rest of the run if you just leave now instead. This is a cool position to put the player in. You'll clearly die if you don't get more items, but how many? Ideally, clearing out every item before moving on would more or less just kill you too. I do think that's the case on harder difficulties. They properly pressurize the decision by offering a chance at victory only if you carefully choose some point between no items and all of the items at which to move on. And of course, depending on how many choices you have, not a lot in base Risk of Rain, you kind of have to make build decisions that make you keep up with the scaling difficulty. If you pick something too frivolous for your build, the time you spent getting it will kill you. I've had plenty of times where I was blown out by trying to wait just long enough to afford a powerful red tier item, only to be just barely short on money. Enemies stop spawning after you defeat the teleporter boss, so I tried to time it so I would start the teleporter with just enough time, just enough enemies being killed during the boss fight that I'd get enough money, and ran just barely short, wasting basically all the time I was saving up money for on the stage, which obviously I'm just an idiot when that happens. But it's interesting to put the player in a position with tension like that. Look, as the first video in this series, we're going a little long on what I intend to be a bite-sized offering. While opportunity cost is just a basic aspect of build systems in many games, and there are tons of these game design concepts, buildcraft basics, hence my little series here. And while you don't need them all in every game, you may not like all of these design ideas all of the time, I will admit that opportunity cost is particularly to my tastes. I know you couldn't tell it all from the rest of the video. Most of the time, if I really like a build system, it's absolutely crammed with opportunity cost. And it's also fascinating to me when I still enjoy making builds in a game that arguably doesn't really have much opportunity cost, as in the Warframe example, because that doesn't happen very often and it just leads me to strange behavior. Something I want to leave you with is that although opportunity cost works with the idea that you can't have everything all at once, and some fun is derived from needing to make that choice and feeling the distinct impact of, only having that and not every other tool available, I would still propose that making it quite easy for the player to try more things is important too. Just because the player has to make a tough choice doesn't mean it's about them never getting to use the other options. Quite the opposite. I think games with high opportunity cost really benefit from allowing the player to make different choices easily and frequently. Now, obviously, as is often the case with my videos, I wouldn't easily be able to make this video in anywhere near a reasonable amount of time if these games didn't go out of their way to make it easy to switch around your stuff. Because Pyre has that versus mode that lets you just build stuff however you want. Because Risk of Rain 2 has that all roads lead to destruction capabilities kind of design thing. And of course, stuff like Warframe's loadout system and similar systems in many games that let you just swap in stuff you have into your loadout. Of course, those systems make it possible to make videos like this one really at all in a reasonable amount of time. But I also wanted to point out that these games have created systems that make making a build a fun activity. And so why not let the player do it more? I feel like some games are trying to keep you away from their build systems, and I think that's a sign that maybe those games ought not to have them. How about that? Opportunity cost, to me, is often a core part of systems that want you in their build systems, hacking around and having fun making stuff and trying your creations out. So that's opportunity cost. A few examples anyway. As with all terms like this one, I don't think a rigid definition is very helpful. So if something feels opportunity costy to you, and you explain why, I think that's awesome. If something comes to mind, I'd enjoy hearing about it. Folks, I've been Zandy, and that was Buildcraft Basics. Thank you for listening. Now, where are we off to next?